Hey everyone, so as an actuary, a mathematician and an investment researcher with over 10 years experience, I'm always looking to better understand the world we live in. That's what led me to systems theory, as I believe it's one of the best ways of understanding our reality. So join me, because in this series I'm going to run through the different elements of systems theory and apply it to our reality. In this video I'm going to discuss the 3 key elements of feedback loops and how you can observe them in your daily lives so that you can better navigate and understand your reality. So let's get into it. So feedback loops are everywhere in complex systems, and feedback loops are essentially where the output of a system affects its own behavior. So some examples might be that you receive feedback as part of your appraisal at work, and that's a very structured form of feedback. Say you might have been taking action throughout the year and get feedback from your action within your complex system, which is your work environment, from your boss, who is another element of the system. That is a very structured form of feedback. Another form of feedback is your body may give you feedback. So as you take action, as you do things, your body may receive feedback from either itself or the environment. An example of that might be you eat a donut and you feel a bit sick. So the feedback is the feeling of feeling sick. Or you worked out and you get the rush of endorphins and the feedback is that you feel great. Or feedback might be more subtle. So you get some adverse body language from your tone of voice from your friend, for example, or you stub your toe walking down your corridor. These are all forms of feedback from your action through moving through your complex adaptive system, i.e. your environment. So there are 2 types of feedback loops. There are reinforcing feedback loops that amplify a particular process, and then there are balancing feedback loops that tend towards an equilibrium. So reinforcing feedback loops can be really helpful if you're looking to progress towards a goal, because they can basically increase the amount of output you get for a given input. So classic examples of this are compound interest, where the amount of money you get basically compounds over time, so you get way more out than you put in. There's the network effect as well. So if you put something positive out into the network, then the network might spread it amongst its own network. So you only have to put it into the network once, and the network might share it itself. There's also negative reinforcing feedback loops. So addiction, that could be one. So as well as spiraling towards something positive, you might be spiraling towards something negative, which is obviously something that we want to avoid. And habit installation is a classic reinforcing feedback loop as well, i.e. a habit is hard initially, but then as you do it over time, it becomes easier and you kind of embed that knowledge within your brain. It becomes automatic. So balancing feedback loops are helpful if you're looking to not change, i.e. maintain some sort of equilibrium. There are lots of balancing feedback loops in biology in particular. So the way your body regulates its internal temperature is a balancing feedback loop. The way it regulates your weight is a balancing feedback loop. A classic, actually, example of a balancing feedback loop that people use is the thermostat, i.e. you set the thermostat to the equilibrium point, and sometimes the temperature falls below that. So your central heating comes on and raises it, and if you go above, then it turns off and then it comes back down. So that's what balancing feedback loops are intended to do. They're intended to kind of maintain an equilibrium. And quite a lot of your body's processes are kind of centered around an equilibrium. So a lot of biological systems are actually set up for that. What typically happens with balancing feedback loops is almost like the harder you push, the harder it pushes back. So I think it's something to be very aware of if you'll find yourself in a kind of balancing feedback loop. It's really hard to stop a reinforcing feedback loop because the flywheel just starts spinning and it kind of gets away from itself. Whereas it's really hard to change a balancing feedback loop because it's always pushing back towards equilibrium. So it's really important to try and understand where these feedback loops are in your reality and make sure you're not adversely pushing against one of them in the wrong direction. So point number 3 is that complex adaptive systems learn from their feedback. So they're constantly absorbing the feedback from their actions and adjusting their course accordingly. And because we know that humans are complex adaptive systems, i.e. we learn, this is something you can apply in your everyday. So I guess the first thing to do would be look for the different feedbacks that are coming at you from your actions. And this can be really difficult actually, because there's a lot of noise, i.e. there's a lot of randomness in the feedback you're receiving, and there's a lot of interaction from different parts of the system. So it's really hard to actually understand the feedback you're getting and filter the signal from the noise. There's also a time delay, which can make it even more tricky to figure out which pieces of feedback are useful and which ones aren't. But I would take the time to try and sit down and think about the different kind of pieces of feedback you're getting and understand which ones you want to have in your life and which ones you don't. Once you've looked at the different sorts of feedback you're getting, try and understand if you're getting balancing or reinforcing feedback. And that could be really helpful because, as I highlighted, it's really hard to push against those different types of feedback loops. You basically have to break down the entire system itself to go against the reinforcing or balancing feedback loop. But if you have them working in your favor, then it can be extremely powerful. So as I said, try not to push too hard against a balancing feedback loop because you'll just, I guess, receive more pushback from the system. So an example of this is, as I said, some things take time, and if you push things too hard and there's not enough time for the system to kind of recalibrate, you'll just end up getting increased pushback from the system, which could lead to you being burnt out, for example. So it's important with balancing feedback loops to factor in rest periods and understand that there's going to be, for every push, a pullback from the system. Similarly, looking for reinforcing feedback loops can help you move faster towards your goal. So obviously compound interest helps. If you're able to receive interest on your money, then it's going to grow a lot quicker, it's going to snowball. Other examples of the network effect, so if you're able to create positive kudos, let's say, within a social network, you might receive a lot more than you put back because people will talk very positively about you within that network. Yeah, as I mentioned, habit installation and making sure you're not doing bad habits as well, because we know that bad habits can stick as hard as good ones. So important to look for where you might be falling down a spiral in terms of certain bad habits. And interestingly, I think humans really struggle with understanding these types of mechanisms because we're very linear thinkers. We always think in terms of, okay, if I do that, then this will happen, and maybe don't pay attention to the second order effects as much. So if you're able to do that and harness that, I think that will put you ahead of a lot of people. So the idea is that by better filtering the kind of feedback you're getting, learning from it, adapting what you're doing, you'll much better be able to, I guess, achieve your goals and live the life you want, or at least eliminate things you don't want in your life. Or if you're in a balancing feedback loop, you might better understand why you're not progressing as you might like. As I mentioned, it can be really hard in assessing the feedback because some have significant delays, so it can feel like nothing's happening, or you might be kind of interpreting the wrong feedback, but this is something that's just gonna have to be part of it and something you might learn to kind of deal with over time. So there we have it, 3 elements of feedback loops within complex systems that are part of our daily lives, and some actions where you can apply this to your day-to-day, hopefully to better understand your reality and to move towards your own personal goals. So I hope you enjoyed that. That was the second video in my systems theory applied, and please let me know if you have any questions, and if you want to hear more from me, don't forget to check out this video here. Thanks.